Stop for a moment and ask yourself this unsettling question. Does being good actually protect you? Or is it the very thing that leaves you exposed? Society constantly tells us that kindness creates loyalty, that generosity earns respect, and that honesty builds trust. Yet history, psychology, and personal experience suggest something very different. The paradox is this: the very virtues we are told to embody can become the reasons we are ignored, exploited, or even betrayed. This contradiction is what Niccolò Machiavelli observed centuries ago, and his insights remain as piercing today as they were in Renaissance politics. The truth is uncomfortable, but facing it is necessary if we want to understand how human behavior really works. At its core, blind goodness creates exposure. Think about the kindest person you know. Do people truly respect them? Or do they merely see them as convenient when help is required? When an individual is consistently kind without setting boundaries, their predictability becomes a weakness. In behavioral psychology, predictability often translates to reduced status. The person who always says yes signals to others that they lack the capacity or willingness to resist. Over time, this person becomes less of a leader and more of a resource, someone to be consumed rather than respected. This is why in organizational settings, we often see the tireless, helpful worker passed over for leadership roles. They are admired for their sacrifice, yet unconsciously categorized as subordinates rather than decision-makers. Machiavelli articulated this dynamic through his metaphor of the lion and the fox. The lion represents force and strength, while the fox represents cunning and awareness of traps. To survive, one must embody both. But what happens when someone chooses to live only as the lamb? In a competitive environment, whether in politics, business, or even family structures, the lamb is not honored for its purity. It is consumed because it cannot defend itself. Human behavior studies reinforce this observation. Individuals who never resist or retaliate invite further exploitation. This is not because people are inherently cruel, but because social systems evolve to reward assertiveness and penalize passivity. In other words, your consistent goodness communicates that you can be used without consequence. The generosity trap illustrates another psychological paradox. The more frequently we provide, the less our actions are valued. In economics, this is known as diminishing marginal utility. The first instance of a benefit carries high perceived value, but subsequent instances create less impact until they are no longer noticed. The same principle applies to human interactions. Help someone once, and they are grateful. Help them repeatedly, and it becomes routine. Stop helping even after years of consistency, and suddenly you are labeled selfish or unreliable. Parents who constantly indulge their children experience this transformation firsthand. What was once joy becomes entitlement, and entitlement quickly transforms into resentment the moment the expected pattern breaks. This phenomenon is not merely anecdotal. It is grounded in hedonic adaptation, the psychological principle that humans rapidly adjust to positive circumstances. In practice, this means gratitude fades as generosity becomes normalized. The result is that persistent givers find themselves resented for the rare moment they refuse, rather than celebrated for the countless times they provided. Strategic thinkers understand this and manage their giving deliberately. They recognize that scarcity creates value, while abundance paradoxically breeds invisibility. As Machiavelli suggested, favors and benefits should be conferred gradually, ensuring that appreciation remains alive and respect intact. Another layer of this paradox lies in the distinction between image and reality. Society tends to reward appearances rather than substance. This does not mean people are shallow. It means that perception is the filter through which reality is interpreted. Leaders, managers, and public figures often maintain a visible mask of virtue. They may appear compassionate, generous, or endlessly approachable, yet behind closed doors, They make difficult decisions that may seem harsh, but are necessary for survival. From a psychological standpoint, this is an adaptive strategy. Humans form impressions quickly and anchor their judgments on what they can see. If people perceive you as weak, you will be treated as weak, regardless of your internal strength or good intentions. This brings us to the concept of strategic virtue. Machiavelli noted that it is not essential for a leader to possess all the virtues, but it is crucial to appear as though they do. The appearance of goodness creates trust, while the hidden ability to act firmly, even ruthlessly when needed, creates respect. This is not duplicity, it is strategy. Think of a physician who delivers painful treatment to save a life. The act may look harsh, yet the underlying intention is genuinely benevolent. The difference lies in timing and control. To act effectively, one must know when to display mercy and when to enforce discipline. Those who invert this order, showing softness to adversaries and rigidity to allies, inevitably damage both their credibility and their influence. The psychology of resource allocation further deepens this analysis. Every act of kindness consumes time, energy, and emotional investment. These are finite resources. A person who disperses them indiscriminately eventually depletes themselves. In organizational psychology, this is described as burnout, a state of exhaustion that results from chronic overextension. People who continually sacrifice for others without replenishment often reach a breaking point where resentment replaces generosity. They begin to feel used, undervalued, and invisible. The irony is that their overextension diminishes their ability to provide meaningful support to anyone, including themselves. Strategic self-preservation, therefore, is not selfishness, but sustainability. The oxygen mask analogy captures this truth perfectly. You must secure your own stability before attempting to assist others. The same logic applies to relationships, workplaces, and social systems. Saying yes to every request is equivalent to saying no to personal growth, creativity, and health. Individuals who learn to manage their yes and no responses strategically gain control over their own trajectory. They ensure that their resources are directed toward goals that matter, rather than being consumed by endless demands that lead nowhere. Consider the leaders, innovators, and visionaries who have left a mark on history. They did not scatter their efforts randomly. Instead, they practiced selectivity. They understood that effective kindness is about making an impact rather than maintaining approval. A professor who demands excellence may be unpopular with students, yet those same students later recognize the rigor as a gift. A parent who disciplines rather than indulges may appear strict, but that discipline prepares a child for resilience. These are examples of strategic goodness acts that may not be immediately pleasant, but are ultimately transformative. The lesson is clear: if goodness is not combined with strategy, it becomes weakness. Without boundaries, generosity transforms into expectation. Without control of perception, honesty becomes vulnerability. Without resource management, kindness becomes exhaustion. To live effectively in a competitive world, one must practice intentional, selective, and powerful virtue. Machiavelli's wisdom was not a call to cruelty, but a recognition of human nature appearances. Matter strength sustains influence, and strategy protects the essence of goodness from being destroyed by exploitation. One of the most difficult realities to accept is the illusion of gratitude. Most people assume that kindness generates loyalty. Yet behavioral psychology shows us the opposite. Gratitude has an expiration date. Acts of generosity, no matter how extraordinary at first, become routine through repetition. This phenomenon, again rooted in hedonic adaptation, ensures that people adjust their expectations until the extraordinary is seen as ordinary. The friend who helps repeatedly is remembered not for the 9 times they sacrificed, but for the single time they refused. The neighbor who always contributes becomes invisible, Yet the moment they stop, they are accused of being selfish. Gratitude in this sense is not cumulative. It is fragile and temporary. This understanding is essential for anyone who wants to preserve their integrity while still giving. The problem is not that people are malicious. It is that human cognition normalizes repeated positive experiences. We stop noticing what is constant. In behavioral economics, this is akin to how consumers stop noticing ongoing discounts. Only new offers capture attention. Applied to human relationships, this means that consistent kindness loses visibility. To maintain its impact, kindness must be strategic, scarce, and memorable. By setting boundaries, by making people feel the absence, as well as the presence of your support, you restore the balance of appreciation. Otherwise, you become an unacknowledged fixture in other people's lives, providing value without recognition. Another lesson lies in the difference between intentions and results. Modern culture often praises sincerity, but in the realm of influence and survival, results matter more than motives. A person with the best intentions can still cause harm if their actions fail to achieve constructive outcomes. History rarely remembers those who meant well, but achieved little. Instead, it remembers the individuals who created tangible impact even if their methods were criticized in their time. The teacher who enforces rigorous standards, the executive who demands accountability, the leader who enacts unpopular reforms. These individuals may not be liked, but their contributions endure. The psychological insight here is that people judge actions based on outcomes rather than motives. They live with consequences, not intentions. Machiavelli's controversial statement, "The end justifies the means," is often misunderstood. It is not a license for cruelty, but a reminder that noble intentions do not absolve ineffective actions. If kindness fails to produce real benefits, it is not goodness at all. It is self-soothing. To be truly good requires courage, the willingness to confront discomfort, and the ability to make decisions that prioritize long-term outcomes over short-term approval. A parent who sets limits on a child may appear strict in the moment, but in truth they are providing structure that shapes resilience. This is an act of effective goodness, one that is grounded in results rather than appearances. What emerges from this analysis is a deeper understanding of strategic virtue. Niceness seeks approval, but goodness seeks transformation. Niceness avoids conflict, while goodness resolves it. Niceness preserves comfort, while goodness creates growth. These distinctions may seem subtle, but they determine whether a life of generosity builds legacy or simply breeds resentment. To practice strategic goodness is to align virtue with purpose, ensuring that every act of kindness strengthens both you and the community you influence. If we shift our perspective toward legacy, the conversation deepens even further. The truth is that history does not celebrate those who were merely agreeable. It remembers those who created change. You may struggle to recall even a handful of nice figures from the past, but you can instantly list individuals who reshaped society, whether they were innovators, reformers, or leaders who were not always gentle in their methods. Steve Jobs was not known for being easy to work with. Yet his insistence on excellence produced innovations that transformed billions of lives. This reality underscores a critical lesson to leave a meaningful mark. Goodness must be combined with strength, selectivity, and resilience. Survival is the foundation of legacy. A person who gives everything away too quickly cannot endure long enough to make a lasting impact. The kind-hearted but perpetually exhausted professional may have noble motives, yet their potential collapses under the weight of exploitation. A generous leader who is unable to establish boundaries may inspire admiration for a season, but they are soon replaced by someone who combines generosity with authority. In human systems, whether families, organizations, or nations, survival is the prerequisite for influence. Without endurance, there can be no contribution, no transformation, no legacy. This is where Machiavelli's insight becomes sharper. His observation that it is better to be feared than loved, if one cannot be both, is not an endorsement of tyranny. It is a recognition of hierarchy in human psychology. Respect precedes affection. People may enjoy the presence of someone agreeable, but they follow the leadership of someone strong. Respect creates stability, while affection alone creates dependency. A leader who is loved but not respected will ultimately lose authority, while one who commands respect can later choose to extend kindness with far greater impact. The sequence matters: strength first, goodness second. From a behavioral perspective, this order reflects the evolutionary dynamics of human groups. Early tribes survived because leaders provided protection before they provided comfort. The role of leadership was to ensure survival through defense strategy and resource allocation. Only after safety was established could generosity become sustainable. In modern contexts, the principle is the same. A business leader who exhausts resources on uncalculated generosity jeopardizes the organization. A parent who offers unending indulgence without discipline undermines the development of resilience in their child. In both cases, the intention is good, but the outcome is fragile. Strategic virtue, then, is about sequence, proportion, and timing. It requires you to resist the urge to satisfy everyone in the present moment in order to preserve strength for long-term impact. It demands that you allocate kindness to where it matters most, rather than dispersing it so widely that it becomes invisible. And it challenges you to think beyond the immediate applause of being liked, focusing instead on the deeper respect that builds survival, influence, and legacy. As we bring these insights together, one conclusion becomes clear: goodness without strategy is dangerous. It creates patterns of exploitation, drains resources, and dilutes influence. People rarely intend to take advantage, yet social and psychological systems reward those who assert boundaries and penalize those who do not. Blind generosity, constant availability, and unconditional compliance may feel virtuous, but in reality, they strip you of power and diminish the very impact you hope to make. Strategic goodness, by contrast, transforms virtue into strength. It recognizes that respect must accompany kindness, that scarcity preserves value, and that appearances shape perception as much as reality. It allows you to remain compassionate without being consumed, to give without becoming invisible, and to lead without surrendering authority. This form of goodness is not manipulation. It is mastery. It is the disciplined use of virtue as a tool rather than a liability. The final measure of your life will not be how agreeable you were, but how much you changed the world around you. History will not remember countless small acts that left no imprint, but it will remember the moments when you combined courage with compassion, strength with mercy, and strategy with generosity. To protect and preserve goodness, you must first secure survival and command respect. Only then can your kindness create outcomes that endure. So the question is no longer whether you should be good. The question is how you will be good. Will your kindness weaken you, or will you shape it into a force that commands respect, creates results, and leaves a legacy? The choice is yours. Choose strategic goodness, because in a world of wolves, only wisdom and strength allow virtue to survive.